here with a new wood door, transom above, and then to replicate the existing wood paneling and windows on that new flat facade, which would be back here where the existing door is now. The section through the front, which is shown right here, would match the paneling below, and we would replicate wood paneling on that wall that would be exposed, so that that entire area would have a very similar feel. We are proposing 3 lights that would go over the tables, and then some recessed lighting, just so that it's not an overwhelming amount of light in that area, which is pretty typical for those kinds of storefronts, to have a little bit of lighting and then just a little bit of down lighting at the tables. In looking at this project, in the guidelines, I was looking at page 51 under historic commercial building facades, and there are a number of bullet points. Specifically, I was looking at the middle of page 51, the last bullet point, which says a new facade design should be a contemporary expression that respects the scale, massing, proportion, materials, styling of surrounding buildings, yet continues the architectural evolution of the city. The idea of this restaurant is that in a traditional storefront where you have wares that you want to show to the public, you would have a window that lets you see all those things that are for sale in that building. And a lot of the guidelines are very specific about having large amounts of clear glass to look through to see those wares. In this specific case, it's a restaurant. They are selling food, and what better way to display that than to have tables out front with people there. We can't really get food per se in those windows to show that that is what is for sale there. So we thought that this was an appropriate remedy for that solution, while being able to not have tables that come into the sidewalk like many of the other restaurants do, but kind of tuck them back into the building so that they're not, people don't walk over them or trip over them on that sidewalk, and leave that free for pedestrians. And that's all I've got right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, I can see in the audience that, unless Lucian, you have some comments? Or Greg? I think we're going to have fairly short public comment periods on the hearings tonight, on the applicants then tonight. Bradley, would you like to provide staff findings and recommendations for this application?
Sure. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Exterior changes to historic buildings, page 50, guideline 7. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are, number 1, this present configuration is no basis in the historic facade of the building. Number 2, the alteration is consistent with outside dining areas found along Middle Street and does not damage the original fabric of the building. Number 3, the materials and design proposed are congruous with guidelines. Staff suggests the Commission approve the application for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
All right, thank you. Sarah, any final comments on the application? All right, thank you. Commissioners, questions or comments? No one has anything.
I think it's an appropriate change.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? In that case, would someone like to make a motion to approve or deny? I have motion worksheets here if you need one.
I do have one question.
Yes.
So when you take that window down, if the flooring is not there, you said you think the flooring is there, what do you intend to do?
there, when looking at the video, you can see, let me see if I can back it up here a little bit.
I know you can see a little bit of the flooring at the front of it that's not covered by that window.
It's a little hard to tell. Right in
Yeah.
here, there is flooring in there. If we take this up and there is just concrete under there, we would probably come back and ask to either paint that specific piece. It would probably have to be topped, or come back and ask to paint the entire floor so that it's consistent. I mean, I suppose it is possible to tool in some of that, that chipped tile that's there, but we won't know. I'm pretty sure that it is consistent throughout that floor, but we would definitely have to come back.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 219 Middle Street to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, Section 15411 to 15429, and New Bern's Historic District guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Exterior changes to historic buildings, historic commercial building facades, pages 50 to 51, guidelines 7, and I'll add 13 for the lighting on the updated submission. Findings of fact, this present configuration has no basis in the historic facade of the building. This alteration is consistent with outside dining areas found along Middle Street. It also does not damage the original fabric of the building, and the materials and design proposed are congruous with guidelines.
Do we have a second?
Second, Ben.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carried. Request a motion to issue a COA.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. COA is issued.
Thank you very
Right.
much.
Thank you, Sarah. Bradley, whenever you're ready for the next application.
317 Pollock Street, to build a wood-framed hip roof on an attached 10 by 10 brick structure, install one copper box on the east elevation, and tie into the existing copper downspout in the tertiary AVC.
Yes, good evening. This is 317 Pollock Street, built in 1930. We do not find any information in Peter Steinbeck's book or John Green's book about 317 Pollock Street. So we do not have any historical data to present to you. We do think that, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna see scan those. I got big drawings, I guess. Change. Zoom out perhaps. Okay, perfect, thank you.
Good.
That's perfect, yep, thank you. What we're here tonight about is the rear of this structure. We have already received a minor permit for some alterations to the rear of this building. Kevin, in fact, had issued a minor for us to put wall coping on every parapet wall all the way around the building. He as well had issued a minor for us to install gooseneck lighting. I'll show you a drawing of that in just a minute. He as well issued a minor permit for us to install canvas fabric awnings over the three windows in the door. He as well had approved a minor for us to install a wood utility screen that would hide the electrical cabinets, et cetera, in this area. And so that COA, by way of a minor, exists, and some of that work has already been put in place. The new application we filed with you comes back and asks for, I might add, I should add, I think, that Kevin as well in the minor permit had allowed a flat TPO membrane roof to be placed over this rear structure. This is a 10 by 10 rear structure that appears to be an addition to the original building. We do not know the purpose in life for this structure, why it was added, its use. We've heard some different comments from those that would like to speculate as to what its use was. It did at one time have a roof. It currently does not have a roof. You can step inside through the gates. There's a gate like this that exists that you can step inside and you can look straight up to blue sky. As I said, Kevin had permitted that we could build a wood-framed TPO roof. It would have metal coping on the outside to match the metal coping that we had been approved to put up on the parapet walls. However, the owner of the building decided he would much prefer a metal standing seam roof. So we may need to go back to the smaller scan. Okay. All right, great, thank you. So we have a new application before you for a COA to put a pitched roof over this 10 by 10 structure. We intend to place a copper standing seam roof. The seams will be made up with there'll be hand crimped seams. You won't see the modern day metal standing seam. There is a lot of modern day standing seam that exists in the rear of 317 Pollock Street. For instance, this is a modern day standing seam roof. Morgan's Tavern, the addition that was placed on Morgan's Tavern, has modern day standing seam. What we are proposing is a copper hand seam ridges, hand seam seams. So that's the first part of the application, is to get permission to put a pitched roof. Now this is a 312. We had thought to keep it low, a low profile. Talked to Mr. Ewer once about his thoughts on whether that should be something that's really seen and appreciated and called out. And I think his opinion, and most I've heard, was that no, let's not call it out, let's not bring a lot of attention to it. Let's just get a roof up there that's going to spill the water off. The owner is very interested in having something authentic. Thus, he's willing to spend the money for copper and hand-crimped seams. The second part of the application asks that we be allowed to place a copper box-style awning, gutter, a copper box-style gutter. And we would like to tie into an existing copper box-style downspout here. So this gutter that will run across above the gates will be tied into an existing downspout. So there you see really all the improvements that are going to be made to the rear of the structure. With the metal coating, the gooseneck lights, the fabric awnings, utility screen. We've already removed a lot of miscellaneous things, like cast iron vent pipes, soil stacks that were on the building, and a lot of just miscellaneous things that the owner wanted us to move that were not historical. So that's all I have. I'll take any questions you have.
All right. Well, again, no public comment on this unless Greg. Bradley, would you like to read staff findings and recommendations?
Yeah. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Exterior alterations to historic buildings, roofs, pages 17 through 20, guidelines 5, 6, and 10. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: proposed roof and gutter are congruous in placement, design, and materials. Staff suggests the commission approve the application for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines. And, sorry, there's a typo. Yep.
Right, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Lucian?
I just have one. At the top of that brick, is there a row lock going all the way around there of brick? That's the way it appears in the drawings. And then your metal copper roof comes down. I guess there's no overhang at all. And honestly, I think the materials and everything's appropriate. I'm just trying to understand the detail of it a little bit.
Yeah, you do in fact see step out. It's not really a row lock. I think they just stepped out 2 courses of brick at the top, and they rounded. These are very thick walls. These walls are at least 16 inches thick, and they actually changed to 24 inches thick on the interior up to about this height. So there was added brick on the inside, but your point is what we will do up here. So with that real thick wall, they placed concrete. It's not really mortar. I think it's really concrete. They just rounded the top of these walls off with concrete. Now we will chip that old concrete. We'll chip the concrete off and get back to brick, and then so we can get a proper fastening into. We're actually framing down into the brick as well as being on top of the brick. So yeah, I don't not proposing an overhang.
And we'll maintain a low profile, I guess, if that's the idea.
That was our thoughts. Yes, low profile.
Thank you.
And you're keeping the iron gates that are at the opening, no plans to replace that with a door or anything like that at this point?
Yeah. There's a door beyond. There's actually a steel frame and modern day steel frame and steel door that exists right here. And the owner's future plans, we would come back to you for perhaps other changes when his plans firm up a bit. But there may be some consideration for a different use of this space on this rear condo. And for now, however, the steel gates that exist will stay up there. And when you walk into these steel gates, you'll look up at our we will have a wood-framed roof, but we're going to use rough-sawn, wide rough-sawn planking on the ceiling of this structure. So
Well, at that point, it will be interior, and we
Yeah.
only deal with the exterior, so.
That's right.
Okay,
But yes, the gates stay up.
all right. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, Lucian, could you put the elevation back on the screen?
My drawing or the,
Your drawing, yeah,
sorry,
it's okay.
there's one of them.
How about the other
What the other?
direction? Just for the record, could you describe how the hip roof, what kind of flashing happens at the vertical brick wall behind the hip roof where it connects? In other words, is that going to be a step flashing, or that's probably what it ought to be,
Yeah.
unless I'm reading the drawing incorrectly.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, but really not drawn, is it? So when this ridge goes back and this roof line, the 312 pitch goes back against the existing brick, there will be exposed copper flashing cut into the brick. It could be that it's, cut into the mortar joints of the brick wall.
I think that'd be preferable,
And to
if-
have-
to
and-
cut into the mortar joints as
Yeah.
opposed to cutting a regular
Yeah, so
across the face of
that's
the
right,
veneer.
not continuous, where you'd have to cut the brick, but rather stepped where you're
Yeah.
following the mortar joints. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We do have a tricky condition because of this chimney that we'll have to have a cricket back there as well to get the water out, because we're dumping water right into the side of that chimney. A bit tricky right there.
That'll be made of copper as well.
All that will be copper, yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to clarify that the gutter on the structure in question, it connects into the downspout, is that correct?
Yeah, the proposed gutter, there really aren't any gutters on the building.
Right,
Yeah,
the proposed gutter, sorry,
yeah, the proposed gutter will.
connect there into the existing downspout.
Yeah, because these downspouts are connected to subsurface drainage. So all of that water drains away from the structure, as opposed to us putting up a new downspout and then spilling the water out onto the sidewalk where it would freeze and become slippery, et cetera. And as opposed to the owner cutting up the concrete sidewalk and new underground subsurface drainage being put in place, we're hoping to do an attractive tie-in from the gutter into the existing downspout.
I just can't picture it, but I'm sure it will be attractive, as you say.
Hope so. I mean, the
I'll
staff,
defer to the others who might be able to envision it, I just don't,
yeah,
you know,
we'd be glad to draw a detail of that and submit it to the staff.
if the others feel it's necessary.
Does the owner own the existing downspout? It's split
He owns the whole building, I think, except for Creative Carolina Creations, which they own they own that condo. He owns the other, there's 4 condos in the building, he owns 3 of the 4. But he's responsible for the exterior.
I think it's a good way to do the water. It only takes less than half of that roof off anyway. It's not that much water.
That's
But
right.
it does keep it out of the doorway. And it's a good idea.
Anything else? Okay, would anyone care to make a motion for approval or denial? Does someone need a sheet?
Now, Mr. Chairman, I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 317 Pollock Street to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, Section 15411 to 15429, and New Bern's Historic District guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Exterior alterations to historic buildings, roofs, pages 17 through 20, guidelines 5, 6, and 10. And findings of fact, the proposed roof and gutter are congruous in placement, design, and materials.
I'd second that.
Any discussion of the motion? In that case, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carried. Request a motion to issue a COA.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion, COA is issued.
Who made the second in that motion?
I did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucian.
Did you note the stepped counter flashing in the minutes, Bradley? Did you note the stepped counter flashing in the minutes?
We'll get that in a more detailed
Okay.
pass through.
Okay.
Should that have been added to the
As long as it's in the minutes, I think it's fine.
motion?
Oh, well, there wasn't a condition attached to it. In the motion, there's no condition.
Yeah, I think that's okay. It was a clarification, in my opinion, of what the intent of the application was.
Yeah, you said the exposed copper flashing cut into the brick.
Cut into the mortar.
Oh, into the mortar?
More.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, our last applicant is not here. It's 1229 National Avenue for after the fact approval for a screened-in wood porch with a metal roof on a previously existing wooden deck in the tertiary area of visual concern.
And rules of procedure say that we cannot hear an application unless the applicant or their representative is here. Since Brian isn't here, we can't continue on with this hearing. I understand that Bradley, I think you said that he was running a little bit late with some work conflicts. Is that correct?
Not for this meeting, no, that was for the design review.
Okay. I'm sorry, Greg, could you come up to the mic so
I spoke to Mr. North, and he said he works late. He normally gets out of the station right around 6, so he should be here. He's just running a few minutes
Okay.
late. Would it be possible to discuss other items, then come back to this?
I don't have a problem with us continuing on with other business administrative updates and let Mr. North, assuming Mr. North comes in a little later, we come back to his hearing. Any issues with that? Okay. Thanks, Greg. All right, since we don't have any public here to make comments, I guess we can skip the public comments period. Other business. The main thing that we have for other business tonight, all commissioners received a copy of the draft guidelines work session. So you've had a chance to look through the guidelines. The directive was not to go through necessarily word by word of the guidelines, but everyone is familiar with the guidelines. Some of you have been involved in this, you know, for the past 3 years. So the directive was to take a look at the guidelines and determine whether there's anything in the guidelines that you think are just way out of line. And what we would like to do is try to get to the point where we're ready to put these guidelines on the HPC website and start collecting public comments on them. I'd like to ask for Vice Chairman Ure, Chairman Gray, and Chairman Morrison to make any comments on this, since that makes up the guidelines committee, as far as where we are with the guidelines, what we've done, and what our next steps are.
I think it's worthwhile just to give a brief summary.
Sure.
Particularly for folks who might be tuning in who aren't familiar with our activities. We've been working for, I don't know, maybe a year and a half or longer now, looking at the guidelines, and we had several goals and evaluating them. I'm going to go through what those goals were. In addition, in essence, we've taken the content of the guidelines and just simply reorganized it in a logical manner. We've grouped things from a very broad point of context, site and setting, and we've organized those chapters from that broad context to a very narrow things like guidelines that have to do with specific materials. And in doing so, we've eliminated almost all repetition that is currently in our guidelines that may fall within various sections. To give an example, I think we have maybe 4 or 5 different sections in our guidelines that talk about paint currently. In the proposed guidelines, we have 1 section that talks about guidelines for paint. The other thing we've done is implemented a numbering system that we believe will make it more useful for the public to navigate the guidelines. It will make it easier for them to communicate with us and staff, and frankly, I think it will make it easier for us as commissioners to craft motions and to discuss the applicability of guidelines. We've eliminated references to residential and commercial. Those essentially are zoning attributes. Instead, we talk about things in terms of scale, mass, and proportion. Likewise, we've also eliminated references to height. In place of that, we talk about development patterns. There are 3 patterns that we've identified within the historic districts, one being a dense fabric, which essentially is our downtown core. The second being a tight weave, which is essentially the historical residential development. I hate to use the term, being we worked so hard to eliminate it, but the houses and things that surround our core. And then the last type of development pattern is the Waterfront District, which accounts for things like the condominiums and the hotels and the convention center, which are all modern day constructions that are of a completely different scale than what historically has been in the districts, as well as these newer developments often come with things like parking and drives and things of that nature, and so that's covered in that development pattern. Likewise, we've eliminated terms such as new construction. Construction is construction. We talk about, we've tidied up our language to talk about improvements, modifications, infill, additions, and replacement in kind. And then the last area that had some fairly heavy modifications, although the intent of our original guidelines is still embodied in the proposed version, has to do with our scorecard. We've eliminated the scorecard and instead converted that to guidelines when it comes to evaluating demolition and redevelopment proposals. We've also had a number of stakeholder meetings, Mr. Chairman. I think we've had, 3 or 4, maybe 5, where we've also shared these goals with those in attendance and gotten feedback in terms of relative to those goals and in terms of other things that we might ought to be looking at. So we do have some input from those focus groups, and I think the intent tonight, if I'm not mistaken, is if the commission is satisfied with where the committee has taken this, that we want to go ahead and initiate our public hearing process, which would be the next step. Is that enough of an introduction, maybe?
Sure.
Okay.
Commissioner Gray, you've been involved in this since day one. Any comments or recommendations on the current draft that we have?
Well, no, I would just say that, to add to what Commissioner Ure had said, is that our intent is to not only make the guidelines easier for us as commissioners to use, but for the public and the applicants to use. And that was an early primary goal, and I think I would hope we've achieved that.
Thank you. Commissioner Morrison,
I want to clarify that I did not start in the beginning, so I just want to praise the work that Commissioner Ure, Commissioner Gray, and yourself have done. And I believe you accomplished all the goals you set. It's very, very well organized, and I think it's ready to be presented for public input.
All right. And we have, would you comment a little bit on the meeting that we had with the State Historic Preservation Office related to going through our...
Yeah, one of our stakeholder groups was a meeting with 3 or 4 representatives of the State Historic Preservation Office. Essentially, we look to that body for guidance in terms of how we conduct our business. The State Historic Preservation Office is usually integrally involved in helping put together the inventory within a historic district. We provided copies of edits to those folks. They gave us some feedback, very positive feedback in terms of the manner and format presented, as well as the content of the guidelines. And I think the only minor criticism they had, they wanted some additional information that pertained directly to the inventory and the, I'm not using the right term, but there's a narrative that describes our historic district and how it's specifically unique to New Bern and why it was worthy of being established. Yeah, and so we've addressed that slight shortcoming, and I agree with Commissioner Morrison. I think we're ready to move on with our process.
So what we're asking the commission to do tonight is, we're not approving the guidelines. That can't be done except through a public hearing. But what we're asking the commissioners is, do you think we are ready to move forward with this, to put the draft out there for public comment, and we will start setting up a few workshops where we can answer questions about the guidelines, get feedback on the draft, hopefully to lead to public hearings on the guidelines in the near future. So again, we're not approving the guidelines tonight. We're just asking for consent to move the guidelines forward for public comment. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Do we need a motion?
I would prefer that we do have a motion, just so that it's all official.
And I'm assuming there's no discussion from, well, then I would move that we make our work in regard to updating the guidelines available for public inspection, and that we also take steps to schedule the necessary workshops and public hearings to continue our process.
A second.
Any discussion?
Does that include putting it on the website?
Yes, it does. That is the first step.
Okay.
No other questions or comments? All right, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. All right, so Bradley, the draft PDF is on Dropbox. I'll get with you tomorrow, and can you get it posted to the HPC website?
Yeah, that's not a problem.
And what we can also do is, I'll work with you, along with Nancy, Jim, and Trip, to get the list of individuals who attended the informal sessions. And I guess it would be most appropriate to send an email to them just to let them know that, yes, you know, it's publicly available for review. And then we'll work to set up some workshops over the next few weeks where we can sit down and go through the guidelines with folks. So we've got a lot to do over the next few months. I hope everyone's up for it, but this is the last piece of a whole lot of work over the past few months, or past few years. Yes?
Could I have a copy of them, because I wasn't at the work
Absolutely.
session and didn't get a copy.
Absolutely.
If I could have a copy to review.
In fact, I'll either give you this copy or we'll get one printed
Okay, all
for
right,
you.
okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, let's see, moving on. Brian will come to you in just a minute. Let's see. Bradley, let's go ahead and do the administrative updates while we're at that point.
Okay, on March 24th, Hubie Tolson requested an extension for the River Station Marina project. In a letter he wrote, this was addressed to Kevin because it was sent when Kevin was still here. Dear Kevin, I understand it's coming up on the 180 days since the River Station Marina project was heard at HPC, and I'd like to extend the time needed to bring this project back before the HPC. I understand that some action needs to take place before the 180-day deadline, so I'm writing to request the extension. Please let me know if you need anything further on this issue. Sincerely, Hubert G. Tolson III, Manager. And we need from the commission a motion to extend the time with a finite number on that.
Okay.
So whether that's 90 days or an additional 180.
Okay. And for those of you who were not involved in this hearing, it was submitted at the beginning of November. It was heard. We had a design review on it at the beginning at the November work session, and then we also had a hearing that was continued at the November regular meeting. So we are at that 180-day period at the end of this month. And just a little bit more information in our city ordinance related to preservation. This is section 15422, Part D. It clearly states that an extension is possible where there is mutual consent between the applicant and the commission. In the past, we have granted extensions for things like this. We try to work with our customer base as much as possible. So my recommendation would be that we extend this for a time period that you guys feel comfortable with. So would someone like to make a motion to extend with a time period?
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion, we extend it for 90 days. I'm open to a different time, but I do make the motion, we extend it to whatever the will of the body is about the length of time, but it seems to me that 90 days is a good time so that we don't let it drift too far. Or maybe we do want to let it drift. But I don't have any feeling about the time. Right.
Okay.
Just a question, is there any preclusion of us extending it a second, actually a third time?
I don't think so. There is nothing in the ordinance that says it cannot be extended,
So
other than mutual consent between the commission and the
valid
applicant.
reasons, okay.
All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion, any questions?
My only question is, what are we waiting on and for this extension?
Frankly, I'm not aware of exactly what's going on with this project.
I believe the plan, and Greg, I don't know whether you want to address this or not. I believe the plan was to go in front of the Board of Adjustment first, once some issues have been sorted out with permits. Is
That's
that correct?
correct, and you might decide to extend it a longer period than 90 days, because prior to going before the Board of Adjustment, it has to go before our Site Plan Review Committee, and that process takes a couple of weeks, and then the Board of Adjustment is normally about 4 to 6 weeks after that. So 90 days, and I believe they're waiting on documentation from the state or whatever agency they're dealing with.
Okay,
So 90 days might be a little short.
okay.
Especially if we have a design review and
That's correct. So you're looking at design review, department review, and then the Board of Adjustment, and then it will come back to you guys,
Okay.
okay?
I can amend my motion to 120 days.
Okay. All right, does anyone have a problem with that? Shall we have a second on that, just to make it formal?
Second.
All right, so, motion is to, extend this for 120 days, which will take us to July? End of July? May, June, July, August, end of August. Okay. All right, any questions or comments on, any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Okay. And Bradley, can you contact QB just to let him know that we've extended it to the end of August?
Sure.
All right, thank you. All right, anything else with administrative updates?
That's it.
Okay. All right. So let's back up and go back to the public hearings again. Brian, thanks for making it here. Bradley, would you like to introduce the application, and then we'll give Brian an opportunity to present it.
Sure. It's 1229 National Avenue for a constructed, screened-in wood porch with a metal roof on an existing wood deck in the Tertiary AVC.
All right. All yours, whichever. Yes. Yes, you need to be sworn in first.
Sworn in.
Do you swear any testimony you give today will be truthful to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, sir. Use the document.
So just to give you guys a refresher from what we discussed a couple weeks ago, it's 1229 National Avenue, the old Baxter Bradbury house. It was built in approximately 1902. The last owner, Jana Shoddy, was renovating the house with my help. She has since moved out of the area to attend medical school in Pennsylvania, so the house is vacant. We were finishing up some repairs, waiting for it to sell, and we replaced the back deck, which the top of the back deck was rotten. It's a wraparound back deck that was existing well before she bought the house in 2001. We replaced the deck, put new railings on it, didn't have up-to-code railings. And when we were doing that, we decided that there's a big old magnolia tree out back, and it kept dumping leaves in the deck. We kept having problems with rain dropping off the eaves and hitting the French doorways and causing some issues at the bottom. So we made the decision to build a screened-in porch without any knowledge of the historic preservation proceedings or how to go about it. Just an old farm boy and a wannabe doctor just decided to build something we thought would work and make the house a better place. So now that we have a agreement for sale on the house, there is someone who is waiting for this COA is the last piece of the puzzle for them to purchase the house. They're hoping to close in the next few days. So when we started going through this process, we learned about the whole historic preservation deal. Originally, I had called the Historic Society, and they had told me as long as it's tertiary, they didn't care. They never directed me anywhere else. Again, not blaming them, that's my fault. So ignorance is my greatest excuse in asking for forgiveness on this whole process. So we built this screened-in porch. It's about 10 feet deep. It's about 14 feet wide. We built it with on the existing deck, again, and it does have a metal roof. And that's the process where we're at right now. There is a design there of what we had. I did bring in an engineer to look at the existing structure. He has suggested some modifications, some slight modifications to bring it up to city code if we do make it that far. So there will be a few slight adjustments about some of the 2x4s and some structure stuff that will just bring it up to city code. So that's where we're at this point. So basically asking for forgiveness, asking for approval, asking for help so we can finally get this house sold and give it to some young new owners who are very optimistic about moving into the historic Riverside area.
All right, thank you. Again, we have no one here to do public comment. So Bradley, would you like to provide staff finding and recommendations?
Sure. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. New construction and additions to historic buildings, pages 73 through 74, guidelines 1 through 6, guideline 8, and guideline 16. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application in staff's judgment are: 1, the proposed enclosed porch is congruous with design guidelines in location, design, and material. 2, the proposed enclosure is in the tertiary ABC and will have little impact on the most visible character-defining features of the home. Staff suggests the Commission approve the application for major exteriorations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
All right, thank you. Any final thoughts or comments before we start?
No, just as I think I mentioned 2 weeks ago, it's an educational experience. Didn't know much about this process, but very respectful of the process now, and certainly we'll be passing on the knowledge of the process to anybody living in that area and the new owners, certainly. My personal opinion, it adds to the house, it adds to the aura of the house. It gives a nice area for a big backyard to look at, and we're hoping to get approval for the existing structure through you and then upgrade it to meet city code and standard so we can then close the deal on this house
All right,
very quickly.
thank you. Commissioners, questions or comments?
See, Brian, we had a little bit of a conversation about roofing material.
Yes, sir.
And could you refresh my memory on where we are in that current
Yeah,
conversation currently?
Sure. We had talked about the rest of the house is asphalt shingles, which we just had redone in August. So new 30-year shingles are now on the house. The metal roof was put on before that. We weren't sure if we were going to do a metal roof because I believe there used to be a metal roof on the house way back when it was first built. So we had talked about that, but then We decided asphalt shingles financially was the better way for us to go, plus they were already on the house. So did put a metal roof on the screened-in porch. It's a green color that matches the shutters of the house. Put metal roofing on there for a couple of reasons. One being the slope of the roof isn't as great, and with all the leaves that come off the tree, it just seemed like a more common sense roofing to put on there. And so we looked at, what it would cost to put asphalt shingles on there. We do have a plywood base underneath the metal, so we could take the metal roofing off and put shingles on there if that was a desire. I don't think it would drain as effectively. Talking with the engineer about it, he had no issues with the metal roof. Engineering wise, it's historically whether it fits your guidelines or not.
Yeah. And just to let everyone else know, it's more of a corrugated roof
Yes.
panel as opposed to a standing seam, which
Right.
our guidelines require a standing seam. And so it'd probably be a good idea to make that a condition on this particular application that we, and an asphalt shingle is fine,
Mm-hmm.
frankly. Make that replacement.
Okay.
Yeah, we have allowed V-crimped metal on roofs in the past. The guidelines allow for V-crimped metal, but unfortunately, this is not. I agree with Vice Chair Yor that this is not exactly a V-crimped metal roofing.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Having looked at this, this is similar to other decks that we have, enclosed decks that we have approved. So I would have to say that no harm done other than trying to get the roofing material sorted out.
Mm-hmm.
You're selling the house, so I assume you'll be moving out of Riverside, but it always works out much better for the applicant if they come to Bradley as the administrator first, to get some guidance.
Sure.
So that by the time you get to the hearing,
Sure.
everything's very
Oh, yeah.
clear and aligned with the guidelines.
Yeah. Oh, lesson learned on that one. Sure.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, you mentioned, Mr. North, that the inspector, the building inspector may make some changes. Would that change the design?
It's not, mostly just reinforcements of a couple areas. He did suggest it is 2x4 rafters, so he'd like to see those shored up a little bit. Doubling up on the headers to 2x6 header. He'd just like to put another layer of 2x6 on there. And then for updraft protection, they want a cement barrier put around the posts, which would be hidden. It would be covered with dirt once it's put in. So it's just a matter of digging down in about a foot, laying in basically a cement mall connecting the foundation of the house and the posts. So really the only visible signs would be the rafters just being supported, but his idea doesn't hinder the current look of it. It would look, you'd have to really look closely to see a difference.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Would someone care to make a motion to approve or deny?
Nancy was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have it if nobody else.
I move that we find the application for 1229 National Avenue for a certificate of appropriateness to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, citing sections 15-411 to 15-429 of New Bern's Historic District Guidelines, based on the following guidelines and findings of fact. New construction and additions, guidelines additions to historic buildings, pages 73 to 74, guidelines 1 through 6, 8 and 16. Statement of reason based on the information contained in the application. The proposed enclosed porch is congruous with design guidelines and location, design and materials. Also, the porch is in tertiary area visual concern, and our guidelines state that that is the appropriate place to locate screen porches. Condition being that the corrugated metal roofing be replaced with fiberglass asphalt shingles.
Second.
Any discussion?
In our condition, should we state that it necessarily be shingle, or would that be at the discretion of Mr. North to put in another type of historically appropriate roof?
Well, are we agreed that that's your preferred method at this time?
That's fine with me, to be honest with you. I was gonna consult the prospective buyers too, to make sure. I don't think that would be an issue, but I'm fine with that.
And what I'd suggest is if there's a change of thinking, that you
Sure.
come in and check with staff, and they
Yes.
could guide you as to whether you need to come back before us, or
Yeah.
whether they could handle it as a minor work.
Well, then we should probably edit this number 1 item that says that the design and the materials. I would just stop with the design and not say the materials. On your statement of reason, the proposed enclosed porch is congruous with design guidelines in location and design, period. Because it's the materials we're questioning.
I'll accept that friendly amendment.
Thank you. I'm being nitpicky.
It's all right with me.
All right, so any other discussion? Does everyone understand the motion? Yes? All right. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carried. Request a motion to issue a COA.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. COA is issued. Thank you, sir, for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you for waiting around. Job gets in the way sometimes, of showing up on time for stuff like this. Thank you.
All right,
Appreciate
thank you.
the effort.
All right. I think we covered other business, administrative updates. Does anyone have anything else? Okay. Meeting adjourned.